The perfect revenge. I always believed marriage was built on trust. Foolish, wasn't I? It started with the late nights, the whispered phone calls, the way Claire, my wife of 10 years, suddenly became too busy. At first I told myself it was nothing. But doubt has a way of festering. A seed planted in suspicion grows into an undeniable truth. So I did what any man who refuses to be a fool would do. I investigated. I followed her one evening, watching as she met him at a dimly lit hotel. David Mercer, a name I recognized all too well. A colleague turned rival, the man who had always envied my success. And now he had my wife. I could have confronted her that night, but anger is a fool's weapon. I needed something sharper, something final. I spent weeks gathering evidence, photos, texts, phone records. I hired a private investigator to dig deeper. What I found nearly made me spiral. Claire and David weren't just having an affair. They were planning to ruin me. She had been feeding him insider information about my company, setting me up for a financial downfall. If she left, she would take half of everything. If I went down for fraud, she'd take it all. So I planned. Step 1. Bait the trap. I acted oblivious, played the doting husband while setting the stage. I accidentally left documents in my office about a lucrative but completely fabricated deal. Claire took the bait, handing the information straight to Mercer. I tracked every exchange, every bank transfer. Step 2. The sting eye made sure Mercer thought he had won. He funneled money into a shell company I created under his name, embezzling funds from his own firm in what he believed was a perfect scam against me. Claire, always the strategist, helped him forge documents that would make me look guilty. What they didn't know? I'd already sent everything to my lawyer, the financial regulators, the police. Step 3. The fall 1 month later, Claire woke up to find our joint accounts emptied. Our house transferred solely to my name. And Mercer? Arrested. She ran to him desperate, but Mercer turned on her the moment the authorities pressed. Him. Claimed she masterminded the entire thing. His testimony sealed her fate. In court, she looked at me, eyes pleading. You set me up, I smiled. You set yourself up. Mercer went to prison for fraud. Claire? She fought. Lied. Tried to manipulate her way out. But the evidence was airtight. She received 10 years. The twist months later, I visited her in prison. She looked pale, defeated. Why? She whispered. I leaned in. Because I knew about you and Mercer before you ever started. Her eyes widened. I led you to him. I made sure you'd betray me exactly the way I needed. She gasped, realizing the truth. I never lost control, Claire. I just let you think I did. As I walked away, I didn't look back. Revenge wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure she never had a chance to rise again. And I had won. The Perfect Revenge, Part 2. Claire had 10 years to think about what she'd done. For me, that wasn't enough. Some men would be satisfied knowing their cheating wife and her lover had fallen. But I wasn't like most men. I wanted her to feel what I felt. The helplessness, the humiliation, the gut-wrenching realization that her life was over. But Claire was a survivor. Even behind bars, she tried to manipulate the system. She played the remorseful wife, the victim of circumstance. I knew she'd try to reduce her sentence, make deals, crawl her way out. I couldn't let that happen. Step 4. The unraveling. A few months into her sentence, whispers started circulating in the prison. Someone had snitched on a corrupt guard. Someone had exposed a secret fight ring. Claire, always the strategist, had maneuvered her way into some powerful circles behind bars, aligning herself with the right people. And then, suddenly, all her. Alliances turned against her. I made sure of it. You see, before her sentencing, I hired a private investigator, one who specialized in prison affairs. A few well-placed bribes, a few leaked rumors, and suddenly Claire was no longer untouchable. The guards watched her more closely. The inmates stopped trusting her. Then came the final blow. Step 5. No escape. Claire was granted a parole hearing. After just 2 years. I expected it. She had always been good at playing the system. But I had prepared for this moment. I had recorded a video. In it, I detailed everything. How Claire had manipulated me. How she and David Mercer had planned. My downfall. How she had betrayed not just me, but everyone who had ever trusted her. I played recordings of her laughing about how easy it was to fool people, how she had always planned to leave me once I was ruined. I sent that video to the parole board, to the warden, to the media. The day of her hearing, Claire sat before the board ready to plead her case. Then they played the video. She turned pale. She tried to deny it. But the evidence was overwhelming. The board saw her for what she was, a liar, a manipulator, a woman who would never change. Parole? Denied. Her sentence? Doubled. The moment she realized she wasn't getting out, she screamed my name. A raw, broken sound, and I smiled. Step 6. The final move. I didn't stop there. I made sure she had nothing to return to. By the time she finally got out, if she ever did, there would be no money, no friends, no reputation left. She would walk out of those prison gates into nothing but a life of complete obscurity. Forever a woman known for her betrayal. And I had moved on, rebuilt. But I never forgot, because revenge isn't just about justice. It's about making sure. The person who destroyed you never has the chance to rise again. And Claire, she was finished. The Perfect Revenge, Part 3. Claire was no longer a threat. Her parole was denied, her reputation was destroyed, and she had nothing left. But I knew her. I knew she wouldn't just accept her fate and rot in a cell. She was too proud, too cunning. Claire had spent years manipulating people, and prison wouldn't change that. So, I kept watching. Step 7. The last gambit 5 years into her sentence, I received a letter. No return address, no signature. Just a few lines scrawled in desperate handwriting. You think you've won, but I never lose. Watch your back. See? I laughed when I read it. She was still fighting, still clinging to the illusion that she could outsmart me. But I wasn't the same man she betrayed. I did some digging. Claire had found herself a new protector inside, an ex-lawyer serving time for fraud. He was smart, connected, and desperate to redeem himself. She must have fed him lies about how she was wrongfully accused, how she had been set up. And just like David Mercer, this man fell for her tricks. I knew what was coming. An appeal, a legal maneuver, a last-ditch attempt to undo what I had done. I had to stop it before it even began. Step 8. The checkmate. While Claire plotted her escape, I made my own move. First, I found the lawyer's weak spot, his sister, the only family he had left. She ran a small business, struggling to stay afloat. I bought her debt, then kindly offered her a deal. Convince your brother to drop Claire's case, and I erase everything. 2 weeks later, the lawyer formally withdrew from Claire's appeal. Without him, she had no legal representation, no strategy, no hope. Her attempt at freedom crumbled before it even left the courtroom. I waited for another letter, another desperate threat. None came. She had finally realized the truth. She was never getting out early. The final twist, Claire spent a total of 15 years behind bars. By the time she was released, she wasn't the woman I once knew. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something hollow. She had no money, no home, no allies. Even the few friends she thought she had were long gone. She tried reaching out to me once, A single message. Why? I didn't reply, because there was nothing left to say. She walked out of prison, not into a second chance, but into a life of complete isolation. The woman who once thought she could ruin me now lived in a world where she was utterly powerless. And me? I thrived. Because real revenge isn't just about destroying your enemy. It's about making sure they live long enough to realize they destroyed themselves. The Perfect Revenge. Part 4. No Redemption. Claire was finally free. 15 years behind bars had taken everything from her: her youth, her beauty, her confidence. The woman who once walked into rooms with an air of superiority now shuffled through life like a shadow, unnoticed and forgotten. But she wasn't broken. Not completely. I had watched her long enough to know that as long as she had breath in her lungs, she'd find a way to crawl back. I couldn't let that happen. Step 9. Closing every door. The day Claire was released, I had someone waiting. Not to greet her, but to make sure she understood exactly how alone she was. A man in a suit approached her outside the prison gates. He wasn't a friend nor an enemy, just a messenger. He handed her a folder, thick with documents, and said 5 words before walking away. "You have nothing left, Claire." Inside the folder were the final pieces of my revenge: a court ruling that stripped her of any financial claims against me, a legally binding non-compete, barring her from working in any industry that could get her back on her feet, a record of every friend, every contact, every person she once relied on. Each one had either abandoned her or owed me favors they wouldn't risk for her, and at the very bottom of the folder, a single bank statement. Balance: €0, no savings, no inheritance, no hidden accounts, nothing. Step 10. The final punishment. Most people, after serving time, try to rebuild their lives. Claire? She tried to run. She called an old lover, one of the many men she had charmed before me. He sent her just enough money for a cheap motel and a few meals. But he never answered her second call. She applied for jobs. No one would hire her, not because of her record, but because I made sure every potential employer knew the truth about her past. Then, in a desperate move, she tried something truly pathetic. She came to my house. I saw her from the upstairs window, standing on the sidewalk, looking up at the life she once tried to ruin. She was thinner, older, her once perfectly styled blonde hair now dull and unkempt. She must have known I was watching, but she didn't move. After 5 minutes, she did something I never expected. She knelt on the cold pavement right outside. The home we once shared, Claire Mercer, the woman who thought she could outplay me, begged. Her lips moved, whispering words I couldn't hear. But I didn't need to. I knew what she was asking for: a second chance, mercy, forgiveness. I let her kneel there, humiliated, for a full hour. Then I turned off the lights. She was nothing to me now, not even worth a response. And as I walked away from the window, I knew the truth. Revenge wasn't about watching someone suffer. It was about making sure they never mattered again. And Claire, she was already dead. The Perfect Revenge, Part 5. The Investigation. Betrayal cuts deep, but I wasn't going to let it destroy me. I needed more than just revenge. I needed justice. So before I made my move, I hired the best lawyer I could find. Not just any lawyer, someone ruthless, methodical, and completely devoid of sympathy. His name was Victor Calloway. He was a man with a reputation for tearing people apart in court. Divorces, corporate fraud, criminal cases. He thrived on destroying his opponents. And now, his target was Claire Mercer. Step 11. Digging deeper. Victor wasn't interested in simple infidelity. He wanted leverage. Real leverage. Something that wouldn't just win me the divorce, but completely annihilate Claire's life. His team got to work. Phone records, financial transactions, private investigator reports. Every dirty secret she thought she had buried, we dug up. What we found was worse than I imagined. Claire's affair with David Mercer wasn't just physical, it was a business partnership. She had siphoned hundreds of thousands from our joint accounts, funneling them into Mercer's investments. She had forged my signature on financial documents to move assets behind my back. She had conspired with Mercer to frame me for fraud, ensuring that if I ever found out, I'd be the one who went to prison instead of them. It wasn't just adultery, it was a goddamn crime. Step 12. The setup armed with evidence, Victor laid out the strategy. Freeze all financial assets. Before Claire even knew we had proof, Victor filed a court order locking down all accounts under her name. No more access to the money she stole. Expose the fraud. We handed everything over to the authorities, signed documents, bank transactions, even recorded phone calls between Claire and Mercer. Turn Mercer against her. The moment the police got involved, Mercer did exactly what we predicted. He threw Claire under the bus to save himself. The man she betrayed me for? The one she thought would protect her? He testified against her in exchange for a lighter sentence. By the time Claire realized what was happening, it was already too late. Step 13. The confrontation. I met Claire one last time before the trial. Not in a courtroom, not in some dramatic standoff. In a cold, sterile conference room at Victor Calloway's office, she sat across from me, wrists shaking, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. "You set me up," she whispered. I smiled, slow and deliberate. "No, Claire, you set yourself up. I just made sure the truth came out." Her lips parted, eyes darting to Victor. I can fix this. We can talk, please." Victor chuckled, flipping through a thick folder of legal documents. "Mrs. Mercer, let me make this simple for you. Your choices are as follows. Plead guilty and accept the reduced sentence we negotiated, or fight this and risk 25 years behind bars." Her face drained of color. "You wouldn't—" I leaned forward, my voice a whisper. "Watch me." Claire signed the plea deal that night. Step 14. The final blow. The trial was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge barely even looked at Claire before handing down her sentence. 15 years in prison. David Mercer got 7. Got everything. The house, the assets. My reputation restored. And most importantly, the satisfaction of knowing that the woman who betrayed me had lost everything she schemed for. Claire once believed she could ruin me. But in the end, she was the one who got destroyed. The Perfect Revenge, Part 6. His Regret. David Mercer thought he had won. He had seduced my wife, plotted with her to steal my fortune, and even prepared to let me take the fall for their crimes. He believed he was untouchable, but men like Mercer always think they're the smartest in the room until they realize they've been outplayed. And now, sitting in a prison cell, staring at the cold concrete walls, Mercer finally understood what regret truly felt like. Step 15. The Broken Man prison had stripped Mercer of everything: his power, his influence, his dignity. The same arrogance that made him successful in business now made him a target behind bars. At first, he tried to maintain his old confidence. He told himself he'd get out soon, that his connections would save him. But weeks turned into months, and reality settled in. No one was coming to help. Claire had betrayed him in the end. He had thrown her under the bus, thinking it would save him. But his deal with the prosecutors only shaved a few years off his sentence. He was still trapped, and, worse, his name was ruined. The business world that once respected him now saw him as a fraud. His clients had disappeared, his company had collapsed, and his so-called friends had moved on, distancing themselves from the disgrace. All because he couldn't keep his hands off another man's wife. Step 16. The letter. I received a letter from Mercer 6 months into his sentence. It was a pathetic handwritten note, far from the smooth, confident emails he used to send when he was plotting against me. You got what you wanted. I lost everything. Claire ruined me, and now I'm stuck in this hellhole with nothing. I should have never touched her. I should have never listened to her. I should have never crossed you. If I could take it back, I would. But I can't. I have nothing left. Is that enough for you? I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in my desk drawer. I never wrote back, because regret changes nothing. Step 17. The ultimate price. 2 years later, I heard the news. David Mercer, once a wealthy, successful businessman, had been found dead in his prison cell. Suicide, they said. The man who thought he could take everything from me had died alone, miserable and forgotten. And Claire? She was still rotting in her own personal hell, serving out her sentence. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel joy. I simply closed my eyes and let out a breath, because in the end, I didn't have to destroy Mercer. His own regret did it for me. The perfect revenge. Part 7. The long game. Revenge isn't about rage. It isn't about acting on impulse. It's about patience, strategy, making sure that when the knife finally slips between the ribs, the victim knows exactly who put it there, and that there's not a damn thing they can do about it. Claire thought she had won. David Mercer thought he had outplayed me. But in the end, they were just pieces on my board, and I moved them exactly where I wanted. Step 18. The undoing. With Claire in prison and Mercer 6 feet under, most men would have walked away. Not me. I wasn't finished, because revenge isn't just about punishment. It's about erasure. Claire still had one last shred of dignity left. Her name. Even in prison, she tried to cling to it. Tried to convince the world that she was just a woman who made a mistake, that she was wronged by the system. I couldn't let that stand. So, I destroyed her legacy. I bought out the remnants of her family's failing business and sold it for scraps. The Mercer name meant nothing now. I acquired the rights to every professional project she had ever worked on and had them erased from history. I hired writers, journalists, and PR specialists to make sure that every time someone Googled Claire Mercer, they saw one thing: the story of a cheating wife who betrayed her husband and lost everything. Now, even if she survived her prison sentence, her past would haunt her forever. She wanted to be remembered. I made sure she was, for all the wrong reasons. Step 19. The final meeting. 15 years later, Claire was finally released. She was a ghost of the woman I once knew. No money, no connections, no future. But I had one last move to make. She didn't know it, but I had arranged for us to meet. A staged coincidence. She had nowhere to go, no one left to turn to. And so, when a stranger offered her a small job, cleaning tables at a restaurant, she took it without hesitation. She never saw me coming. I walked in one evening, dressed in the finest suit money could buy, and took a seat near the back. She turned, ready to serve. Then she saw me. Her breath caught. Her face went pale. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then I smiled and tipped her $100 bill. She hesitated, eyes burning with humiliation, but she took it. She had no choice. As I stood to leave, I leaned in close and whispered, "Enjoy your freedom, Claire. You earned it." Then I walked out, leaving her standing there, shaking, clutching the only money she had left. She thought she had taken everything from me. But in the end, she was the one who lost everything. The perfect revenge. Part 8. The proof. I always knew something was off. The late-night meetings, the sudden secrecy, The way Claire's phone was always just out of reach, face down on the table. But suspicion wasn't enough. If I wanted to destroy her, I needed proof, and once I had it, there would be no denying what she had done. Step 20. The investigation begins. I hired James Holloway, a private investigator with a reputation for uncovering the ugliest secrets people tried to hide. He didn't ask questions, just did the job and got results. Within a week, he had enough evidence to make my blood run cold. Photos, videos, bank statements. Claire wasn't just cheating, she had been living a double life. Romantic weekend getaways with David Mercer, all paid for with my money. Secret credit cards under her maiden name, funded by stolen funds, dozens of texts and emails detailing how she planned to leave me once she drained everything I had. She wasn't just unfaithful, she was plotting my downfall. Step 21. Setting the trap confrontation would have been too easy. No, Claire needed to feel safe, to believe she was still in control while I built the noose around her neck. So, I acted normal. I kissed her goodnight, told her I loved her, let her think I was still blind. Meanwhile, I made my moves. I transferred all major assets into accounts she couldn't touch. I changed the locks on my personal safe and documents. I set up security cameras in the house, not to catch her, but to watch her panic when she realized she was losing control. And then, for the final blow, I told her I had a business trip. Step 22. Catching them in the act I didn't go anywhere. Instead, I waited, just a few blocks away in a rented car, watching the live security feed. 2 hours later, she brought him into my home. They laughed, drank my whiskey, made themselves comfortable in the bed I had bought, and then, as if the universe wanted to reward me for my patience, Claire did something truly stupid. She opened my office safe, not knowing I had replaced the original. Contents with a hidden camera watching her every move. She wasn't just cheating, she was stealing. And now, I had everything I needed to ruin her. Step 23. The fallout. The next morning, I came home early. Claire and Mercer were still asleep, tangled in my sheets like rats. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to scream. I simply pulled out my phone, opened the live feed from my security cameras, and let the evidence play out in front of them. Claire turned pale. Mercer stammered. I watched as realization crushed them. Their affair wasn't just a betrayal, it was a crime. And now it was time for revenge. The perfect revenge. Part 9. The Reckoning. There was a moment, just one brief second, where Claire looked at me and saw something she had never seen before. Fear. She had spent years thinking she was in control, that she could manipulate, cheat, and steal without consequences. But as she sat there, naked, exposed, and caught in the act, she finally understood. I wasn't her fool, I was her executioner. Step 24. The power shift. David Mercer scrambled for his clothes, babbling apologies, excuses, anything to soften the inevitable blow. But I wasn't interested in his words. I was interested in watching them suffer. So I did the one thing neither of them expected. I smiled. Then I pulled up the evidence on my phone. Photos, financial records, recordings of their late-night whispers plotting against me. Claire's breath hitched as she saw herself on screen, rifling through my safe, sealing her fate. This, I said, tilting the screen toward her, is everything I need to destroy you. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please, we can talk about this, I chuckled. Oh, Claire, I'm done talking. Step 25. The ruin over the next few weeks, I made sure every piece of her life fell apart. Financially, she was ruined. I moved every last asset out of her reach, filed fraud charges, and froze her accounts. Socially, she was exposed. I leaked the affair, her theft, and the full extent of her betrayal to friends, colleagues, even her family. Legally, she had no escape. My lawyer, Victor Calloway, ensured the divorce terms were brutal. Claire left with nothing. No money, no home, no dignity. And Mercer? I didn't forget about him. His company suffered massive losses when I pulled key investments. His reputation crumbled when I sent damning evidence of his financial misconduct to the authorities. He thought Claire was his partner. She was his downfall. Step 26. The final goodbye. Claire tried to reach me. Dozens of calls. Hundreds of texts. I ignored them all. But one night, as I was about to enjoy a drink on my balcony, my phone rang again. Claire. For once, I answered. Her voice was unrecognizable, hoarse, desperate, broken. I have nothing, she whispered. No money, no place to go. Please, please, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I swirled the amber liquid in my glass, staring out over the city. You're not sorry, Claire. Silence. Then, barely audible. Then, what do you want? I chuckled. I already have what I want. You lost. And with that, I hung up. That was the last time I ever heard her voice. Claire Mercer had once thought she could betray me and walk away unscathed. But in the end, she didn't. Just lose everything. She lost me. The Perfect Revenge. Part 10. The second betrayal. I had won. Claire was out of my life, Mercer was buried under the weight of his own regret, and I had moved on. Or so I thought. For a while, life was good. I rebuilt my reputation, my finances, my future. I even met someone new, Sophia. She was everything Claire wasn't. Loyal, kind, and seemingly devoted. I let myself believe in love again, and that was my mistake, because betrayal has a way of finding you twice. Step 27. The signs. At first, it was subtle. Late nights. At work. A new passcode on her phone. The way she avoided my gaze when I asked simple questions. I had ignored the signs once before. I wouldn't make that mistake again. So I tested her. I told her I had a business trip. I left home. But this time, I didn't go anywhere. I waited, just like before, watching through the security cameras I had never removed. And just like before, the truth unraveled before my eyes. She wasn't alone. Step 28. The déjà vu. The man was younger, cocky. He kissed her like he owned her, like I didn't exist. I watched as she led him into my home, our home. I didn't feel anger, I felt clarity. Some men break when they are betrayed. Others learn, adapt, become something else. I had become something else, and this time, I wouldn't just destroy her. I would make sure she never even had the chance to recover. Step 29. The perfect trap. I gathered my evidence, videos, messages, photos, every piece of proof I needed to ruin her life. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. No, this time I let her think she got away with it. I played the part of the loving, oblivious husband, while behind the scenes, I dismantled everything. I moved my assets into private accounts under a legal trust, ensuring she couldn't touch a dime. I had her signed prenup enforced, stripping her of any financial claim in case of divorce. I informed her employer of her extracurricular activities, ensuring she wouldn't just lose me. She'd lose her career, too. And for the final touch, I sent her lover's wife everything. Step 30. The grand reveal. One night, I set the stage. A romantic dinner, candlelit, just the two of us. She sat across from me, smiling, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. I pulled out my phone and played the video. Her smile vanished. Her hands trembled. You set me up, she choked. I leaned back, sipping my wine. No, Sophia. You set yourself up. I just let you dig your own grave. Her lips parted, her mind scrambling for an escape. But there was no escape. Pack your things, I said calmly. You're leaving tonight. She opened her mouth to plead, to cry, but I held up a single envelope. Divorce papers, already signed, already finalized. You lost, I whispered. Just like the last one. And as she stood there, broken and exposed, I realized something. Some people never change. But me, I had become the storm that washed them away. The perfect revenge. Part 11. The final break. Sophia, just like Claire before her, thought she could pull the wool over my eyes. She had fooled me once, but I wasn't the same man anymore. I had learned to read the signs, to see betrayal before it ever fully bloomed. And when the storm of her deceit finally broke, she couldn't hide. Now she stood in front of me, her eyes wide with shock, her world collapsing around her. This was my moment. Step 31. The calm. Before the storm. She didn't fight. For the first time in our relationship, Sophia didn't make excuses. She didn't try to manipulate or talk her way out. She was simply lost. I watched her gather her things, slowly, as though each item she packed from our home was a reminder of how everything she had built with me had crumbled to dust. I never meant for it to go this far, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I heard it. The regret. I didn't respond. Words weren't enough anymore. They never were. Step 32. The legal hammer by the time she had packed her last bag and stood by the door, I handed her a small manila envelope. Sophia stared at it, almost afraid to open it. But she did anyway. Her face turned pale as she flipped through the divorce papers, already finalized, along with an ironclad non-disclosure agreement that sealed her lips about everything that had happened between us. I watched her eyes widen as she realized there would be no publicity for her, no way to rewrite the story, no way to manipulate anyone into thinking she was the victim. I had already turned the tables, and this time there was no escape. You're not getting a dime, I said coldly. Not a penny. You've already used up everything you could take from me. Sophia's face flushed. She wanted to argue, scream, beg for something, anything. But I didn't let her. I shut the door on her before she could say another word. Step 33. The message as I sat down, I couldn't help but smirk. The plan had been so precise, so perfect, and I was finally free. But I knew one thing. Sophia wasn't finished. She would try to rebuild. She would claim she was the one who suffered. She would go to her friends, her family, and spin a story of how I was the villain, the one who broke her heart. I had been down that road before, but this time, I had prepared for it. I took a deep breath, leaned back, and made one final call. The call went out to a few select people, journalists, lawyers, and the people who could destroy whatever narrative Sophia might try to build. I sent them the full story of her affair, the lies, the betrayal, not just from me but from the man she cheated with. I made sure the truth would be impossible to escape. Her family, her friends, her career, everything she had built up would come crashing down. No one would believe her anymore. Step 34. The echo of silence. Sophia tried to fight back. She reached out to me, demanded a meeting, tried to plead for a second chance. But I didn't meet her. I simply disappeared. Moved on. My life was mine again, untainted, unbroken. I rebuilt what I had lost and forged ahead. I found new connections, new friends, and a peace I hadn't known in years. Sophia? She faded into the background, her name whispered only in hushed tones. The truth about her, about Claire before her, was out there, and no matter how much they tried to twist it, they would always be remembered as the women who chose betrayal. In the end, revenge wasn't about vengeance. It was about letting them destroy themselves, watching them unravel, and knowing you never had to lift a finger. The Perfect Revenge. Part 12. The Empty Victory. The silence stretched. It was a kind of peace I hadn't expected. The fallout from Sophia's betrayal had been swift, complete. Her reputation tarnished, her connections severed. She vanished from my life, like a shadow that faded with the light. The people who mattered knew the truth, and the rest? They never really mattered. But even in the midst of this victory, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I had destroyed them, Claire, Mercer, Sophia. I had taken away their dignity, their freedom, and in some cases, their futures. Yet, there was a strange emptiness in the aftermath. Step 35. The price of revenge. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I found myself sitting alone at night, staring at the walls that had once held memories I no longer cared to recall. The rooms felt hollow now, empty echoes of a life that no longer mattered. I had achieved everything. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had won. I thought revenge would bring closure, satisfaction. But it hadn't. It wasn't the chaos of their lives crumbling that left me unsettled. It was the fact that in ruining them, I had forgotten something important. What was left for me? Step 36. The realization. I had built my entire life around the idea of payback, the idea that once I exacted my revenge, everything would fall into place. The pain would be gone. The wrongs would be righted. But the truth hit me hard. Revenge doesn't fill the emptiness inside you. It just deepens it. I had lost myself in the pursuit of vengeance, in the obsession to see others fall. I had tricked myself into believing that destroying Claire, Mercer, and Sophia would make me whole again. But they were never the source of my pain. They were simply the reflection of something deeper. What do I want now? What was the point of destroying those who betrayed me if I ended up betraying myself in the process? Step 37. The decision. I realized I didn't need to keep living in the ruins I had created. I needed to move forward, to let go of the obsession that had consumed me. I left the house, the place where it all started, the place I had designed to trap those who tried to deceive me. It was no longer mine to claim. And so I did what I had long since forgotten how to do. I started fresh. I moved to a new city. I found a small apartment. I reconnected with people who didn't know my past, people who didn't look at me through the lens of betrayal and anger. I didn't seek redemption. I didn't expect forgiveness. I simply allowed myself the chance to live without the weight of vengeance on my shoulders. Step 38. The final thought. Months passed. The memories of Claire, of Mercer, and even of Sophia faded into the background. The life I had once known was a distant memory, a story I could now look at without the sharp sting of bitterness. One evening, I was walking along the water, watching. The sun dipped below the horizon when I realized something important. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need them to pay. What mattered most was that I had finally found peace, and in the end, that was the only real victory I needed. The Perfect Revenge. Part 13. A New Beginning. I had reached a place of stillness. The years spent in pursuit of vengeance had drained me, leaving me hollow. The faces of those who had wronged me still lingered, but I had learned to keep them in the background, faint shadows in the corners of my life no longer at the forefront. Life in its simplicity began to feel full again. Step 39. The unlikely encounter. One afternoon, as I was walking through the park, I bumped into someone. Her name was Maya. She was walking her dog, an excitable golden retriever that almost knocked me over. She apologized, with a laugh, her bright eyes sparkling with an unspoken warmth. It was a kindness I hadn't encountered in a long time. We struck up a conversation, which led to another, then another. And over time, we became friends. Nothing rushed, no expectations, no baggage. Just two people, simply enjoying each other's company. Maya didn't know my story. She didn't know the wreckage I had left behind, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to tell her. Step 40. Rediscovering trust. It wasn't that I had forgotten what betrayal felt like. It would always remain a scar, part of me. But Maya, with her patience and gentleness, helped me realize something crucial. Not everyone was out to hurt me. I had built walls so high around my heart, walls forged from years of anger and mistrust, but Maya showed me how to lower them, brick by brick. Slowly, I began to let someone in again. It wasn't easy. It wasn't instant. But for the first time in a long time, I found myself thinking about a future where I could trust again, where love didn't feel like a game of survival. Step 41. A quiet peace. Months passed, and Maya and I grew closer. We spent weekends exploring the city, cooking meals together, laughing over shared memories. She was patient with me, giving me the space I needed to heal, never pushing, never demanding. And one night, after a quiet dinner under the stars, I looked at her, not through the lens of someone who had been betrayed, but through the eyes of someone who had finally begun to heal. "Maya," I said softly, "I never thought I'd feel this way again." She smiled, her hand gently brushing mine. "You don't have to be afraid. I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't afraid either. Step 42. The choice to let go. I hadn't expected forgiveness to come in the form of someone new. I had thought it would be something I would have to earn, to look back and make peace with my past. But in truth, it wasn't just about forgiving the people who had wronged me. It was about forgiving myself. I had spent so much of my life consumed by revenge, by the need to right the wrongs, that I had forgotten to look forward. I had forgotten that my future was still out there, waiting for me, free from the chains of the past. Maya was a reminder of that future, a future where peace was the only thing I needed to chase. Step 43. The unwritten story. As the seasons changed and the years passed, the shadow of my past faded further into the distance. There would always be moments of reflection, of remembering the pain that once consumed me, but I didn't have to carry it anymore. And as I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sunset with Maya beside me, I realized something profound. I didn't need revenge to feel whole. What I had always needed was the chance to let go. And I had finally given myself that. The future was unwritten, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to live it. The Perfect Revenge, Part 14, the final chapter. The sun was setting on a new life. It was a peaceful, tranquil evening, one where everything felt perfectly aligned, as though I had been waiting for this moment without even realizing it. Maya was beside me, her laughter filling the air. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the world shift around us. The dog she'd rescued from a shelter curled up by our feet, content in the simple joy of being together. I hadn't realized just how much I had longed for this quiet, for this sense of belonging. Life hadn't always been kind, but somewhere along the way, I had found my way back to something worth living for. Step 44. The echoes of the past. As the days turned into months, I realized something important. The past had no power over me anymore. Sophia's name didn't sting when I heard it anymore. Claire's face no longer haunted my dreams. Even Mercer's schemes no longer filled my thoughts. They had all been part of a chapter in my life that was now closed. The final confrontation with them, the careful unraveling of their betrayals. It all felt like another lifetime. The man who had orchestrated their downfalls was not the same person who sat on this porch with Maya. The rage, the hurt, it had melted away over time, replaced with a soft sense of gratitude for what I had learned and where I had ended up. Didn't need closure because I had found something much more valuable: freedom. Step 45. The turning point one afternoon, as Maya and I were out for a walk, I received an unexpected call. It was from an old friend, Victor Calloway, the lawyer who had helped me with the divorce. "Hey, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time," Victor said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "I've been meaning to reach out to you. There's something you might want to know about your past. It's about Claire." My heart skipped. I hadn't heard her name in so long, and the mention of it instantly pulled me back to a time I thought I had put behind me. "Go on," I said, my voice steady, though I felt the past nudge at me like a forgotten ghost. Victor hesitated. "I don't know how to say this, but Claire's been in touch. She's trying to find a way back into your life." I paused, the shock of hearing her name again mixing with a wave of disbelief. After everything, after all the pain, why would she reach out now? Is she trying to cause trouble? I asked, my tone sharp, though my pulse was calm. "No, not trouble. She's changed, or at least she says she has. She's looking for some kind of closure, redemption, I think, but she needs to speak to you to explain herself." I let out a breath. "I'm not interested, Victor. I've moved on." "I know, but I thought you should know." I thanked him, hung up the phone, and turned to Maya, who had been watching me with a quiet curiosity. "Is everything okay?" she asked, sensing the shift in my demeanor. I looked at her, searching for the right words. "It's just a shadow from the past, something I thought was over." Maya nodded, squeezing my hand. "Whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone." Step 46. The reflection. The decision to not confront Claire was easy. I didn't need her explanations. I didn't need the closure she thought she owed me. I had already healed. Already learned the lessons I was supposed to learn. The only thing left for me was the future. I thought about the time I had spent with Maya, how she had slowly become the peace I never knew I was looking for, the love I had been afraid to believe in again. It wasn't perfect. No love ever is. But it was real. As we sat together that evening, the world fading into twilight around us, I realized something important. I had finally stopped living in the shadows of my past. I had moved beyond it, beyond them. The storm was over. The calm had settled in, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. The end. The perfect revenge. Epilogue. The unexpected gift. Life, they say, is unpredictable. Just when you think you've found the peace you've been chasing for so long, it has a way of surprising you, tossing a curveball when you least expect. It's step 47. The letter months passed after that conversation with Victor. Life with Maya had settled into a comfortable rhythm. I had a small circle of friends, a steady job I enjoyed, and an apartment that felt like home. The shadows of the past seemed like distant echoes, faded memories that had lost their power. But as the seasons shifted, something came to me unexpectedly. One afternoon, while I was sipping my coffee at a local cafe, a letter arrived. It wasn't from a lawyer, a friend, or anyone I had known recently. It was addressed to me, handwritten in Claire's familiar scrawl. At first, I didn't want to open it. I had moved on. I had built a life that didn't need her interference. But something in me urged me to peel open the envelope, the past calling me for one final time. I unfolded the letter, and there it was. I don't expect forgiveness, but I owe you this. I was wrong. I betrayed you in ways that no apology can fix. I am not the same person I was back then, and I know that means nothing to you now. But I hope someday you'll understand why I did what I did. You deserve to know the truth. I've spent years carrying the weight of my choices, and I'm finally ready to set it down. I'll leave you to decide what to do with this. But know this. If you ever need to hear the full story, the door is open. I'll be here even if I'm not the person you once knew. Step 48. The decision. I sat there, the letter in my hands, staring out the window as the world outside continued without me. Part of me felt a strange pull, curiosity maybe, or some last remnant of the man I used to be. But another part of me was calm, unaffected. I had already made peace. The past was a place I didn't need to revisit. I had moved on, and that was enough. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it back into the envelope, and placed it in a drawer that would stay closed, just like that chapter of my life. Claire's story was hers, and I had no need to keep turning pages. Step 49. A quiet life. Maya and I continued our life together, and it was everything I had never expected. It wasn't filled with grand gestures or dramatic moments, but it was real. It was steady. It was comfortable. I no longer chased after revenge, and I didn't need to track down the past for closure. The future, with its simple joys, was what mattered now. We traveled occasionally, cooked meals together, shared quiet evenings, and found joy in each other's company. There was nothing more I could ask for. One evening, as I watched Maya cook dinner, the familiar warmth of the kitchen wrapping around us, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I had been given another chance at happiness, at love, and I wasn't going to waste it. Step 50. Full circle. And so, the story closed. The revenge, the betrayal, the hurt. They all became distant memories, like faded photographs that no longer held the same meaning. I had stepped away from the chaos, away from the destructive need for retribution, and found something far more precious than I had ever expected. Peace. A peace that came not from the destruction of others, but from the rebuilding of myself. From letting go. From choosing a future free from anger, free from the chains of the past. I didn't need Claire's apology or explanations. I didn't need Sophia's regret or David Mercer's repentance, because I had already found the one thing that truly mattered, a life that was mine again. And in that I had everything I needed: the end, the perfect revenge, epilogue, a twist of fate. Just when I thought my story had come to a close, fate had a way of rewriting the ending. Again. Step 51. The unexpected visitor. It was an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day that seemed too mundane to be of any significance. Maya and I had spent the morning together. She was preparing a new recipe I had never heard of, and I was at the kitchen table trying to finish a project for work. Everything was peaceful, uncomplicated, until the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Maya was halfway through chopping vegetables, so I answered the door myself. There, standing on the doorstep, was a man I hadn't seen in years, David Mercer. He hadn't changed much, still the same polished, confident exterior, but his eyes, they were different. There was something there now, something raw, like he had been through hell and come out the other side, scarred but wiser. "You mind if I come in?" he asked, his tone calm but with an edge of urgency. I stood frozen for a moment, my mind racing. I had nothing to say to him. After everything that had happened, the last person I expected to show up at my door was David Mercer, the man who had played a key role in the destruction of my marriage. But there was something in his gaze, something that told me this wasn't about Claire or the past. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside, allowing him to enter. Step 52. The revelation. We sat down in the living room. Maya, curious but polite, excused herself, saying she would be in the kitchen. I appreciated her respect for the situation. This was between me and Mercer, and I wasn't sure what he was here for. "I won't take up much of your time," Mercer began, his voice steady but tinged with something I hadn't heard before: vulnerability. "I've come because there's something you need to know, something I should have told you years ago." I leaned back in my chair, my arms crossed. "I'm listening." He took a deep breath, clearly weighing his words. "Claire, she wasn't just using you to get what she wanted. I know that's hard to believe after everything that's happened, but the truth is, she was manipulating both of us. You were a pawn in a game far bigger than either of us realized." I narrowed my eyes. "What are you talking about?" Mercer looked down for a moment as if gathering his thoughts, before meeting my gaze again. "Claire had a plan all along. She was using her affair with me to destroy your life. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about control. She was orchestrating everything, and I was just a tool in her hands." I could feel my blood pressure rising. My fists clenched at the thought of Claire, always one step ahead, always with her schemes. But this was new. A revelation, Mercer continued, his voice strained. "She wanted you to be the villain, wanted you to look like the bad guy so she could play the victim and win in the end. She had this whole story planned out in case things ever went south. She needed you to react the way you did." My mind raced. The pieces started to fall into place, but something felt off. There was more to this. "You're telling me she set me up?" I asked, the disbelief in my voice clear. Mercer nodded. "She planned your downfall, and I was complicit in it, every step of the way. But the worst part is, she never cared about either of us. She was using me to get you to the breaking point, to make you hate me, to destroy both of us." I sat in stunned silence. What did this mean? Had she truly orchestrated everything, from our relationship to the betrayal? Step 53. The final game. David leaned forward, his voice now laced with regret. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, and I'm not expecting you to believe everything I'm saying, but I have something you should see." He pulled out a small flash drive from his pocket, sliding it across the coffee table toward me. "Claire kept records of everything. Emails, texts, photos, everything she used to manipulate the situation. You need to see it. Because if you really want to destroy her, you need the truth, the whole truth." I hesitated. This wasn't about redemption anymore. This wasn't about Claire or Mercer or revenge. This was about truth. The truth that had eluded me for so long. I picked up the flash drive and, without saying another word, stood up to go to the computer. The room was thick with tension as I plugged it in. The screen flickered to life, revealing a folder with far more content than I could have imagined. There they were, the files. A detailed record of Claire's manipulations, her calculated lies, and her plot to destroy everything I had worked for. I scrolled through the documents, each one more damning than the last. Claire had planned it all. Every betrayal, every twist of fate had been part of her strategy. But now the question wasn't whether I should seek revenge again. It was whether I was willing to expose the truth for the world to see. Step 54. The choice. The perfect revenge. Final chapter. Letting go. The day had come full circle, the last chapter of this long and painful story finally within my grasp. I sat at the desk, staring at the screen in front of me, the contents of Claire's manipulative plots flickering before my eyes. It was a temptation to hit send, to expose everything, to lay it all bare and let the world see what she had done. But I realized then, as the weight of my decision pressed down on me, that letting go was the most powerful thing I could do. I closed the laptop. The past, all of it, stayed locked in the digital files. The truth would remain buried, not because it was unimportant, but because I was done with it. I was done with the anger, done with the revenge, done with the ghosts that had once haunted me. I had taken back control of my life, but it didn't have to be defined by the destruction of others. I wasn't the person who needed to tear down someone else to feel whole. That was the last piece of the puzzle, the final realization that I could move on without any more consequences or satisfaction from others' pain. Step 55. The gift of freedom. I didn't reach out to Claire. I didn't send the files to anyone, and I didn't seek validation from anyone else. The only thing that mattered now was the freedom I had fought so hard to achieve, the freedom to live without the shackles of my past. And with that freedom came the most unexpected gift of all: true peace. In the days that followed, Maya and I continued to live our lives, ordinary yet extraordinary, with simple pleasures. We built memories, not built on vengeance or unfinished business, but on shared experiences that only deepened our bond. Maya knew nothing of the files. She didn't need to. Our life was ours, and that was enough. Step 56. The legacy of letting go years past, and the man I had been, the one consumed by revenge, by pain, by betrayal, became a distant memory. I no longer carried the burden of those past grievances. And the oddest thing happened. I forgave myself. It had been something I had never fully allowed myself to do before. But now, looking back, I realized I had grown into someone unrecognizable from the man I had once been. And as I stood on a quiet balcony one evening, gazing out over the horizon, I felt something stir within me. Hope. Hope for the future. Hope for the life that was yet to come. The past had been difficult, brutal even, but it had shaped me into the person I was today. And for that, I felt an odd sense of gratitude. It wasn't that I was thankful for the pain. It was that I had learned to embrace it, to let it be part of my story without letting it define me. Step 57. A new beginning, Maya. And I found ourselves at a crossroads one evening, sitting across from each other at a cafe. We had come a long way together, through the laughter, the challenges, the quiet moments of understanding. She smiled, her eyes bright. "I've been thinking," she said. "Maybe it's time we start something new. A fresh chapter. No more. Looking back?" I smiled back, realizing how much she had come to mean to me. "I think you're right," I replied. "Let's take that next step, whatever it is." And with that, we walked forward, together. Not looking back, not clinging to the past, but embracing the future with open arms. No longer shackled by betrayal, revenge, or fear. The true ending, revenge I once so desperately sought had never been about destroying others. It had always been about finding myself again. It was about regaining control over my own life and stepping away from the darkness that had clouded my path. I had already won. Not by exposing Claire, not by taking revenge, but by walking away from the chaos and creating a life of my own. And in that, I had found the peace I had spent so many years chasing. The end.